The crystalline ship emerged from hyperspace like a wounded angel, its once pristine surface now webbed with fractures that caught the light of Earth's sun. Inside the massive vessel, life support systems hummed on emergency power as the last remnants of a dying civilization huddled around failing energy cores. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at her station in Earth's Orbital Defense Command, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display. The alien ship had appeared just beyond lunar orbit, its energy signature unlike anything in their database. "Sir, the vessel's shield harmonics are degrading. If they don't stabilize soon, their hull integrity will fail." Commander Chen studied the readouts with a frown. The ship's design was beautiful despite its damage. Sweeping curves of transparent crystal lattice that seemed to dance with inner light. Any hostile signatures? Negative. "Sir, their weapon systems appear to be." Sarah paused, double-checking her readings. "Sir, they don't have any. The ship is completely unarmed." The command center fell silent. In the 3 decades since humanity had begun serious space exploration, they'd never encountered an advanced species without defensive capabilities. The ship's crystal structure alone spoke of technology centuries beyond Earth's current level. A signal flashed across their communications array. The alien transmission came through in perfect English, though the voice carried an ethereal, melodic quality. "People of Earth, we are the Tyranny. Our children are dying. Please help us." The next 12 hours became a blur of diplomatic channels and military protocols. When the Tyranny finally received clearance to dock with the International Space Station, Sarah was among the first to meet them. The airlock cycled, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The aliens were tall and graceful, with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors with their movements. Their large, expressive eyes held an intelligence that immediately dispelled any doubt about their sentience. But it was the children that broke her heart. Their skin was dull, almost gray, and they moved with visible weakness. The Tyranny leader stepped forward, his translucent robes flowing like liquid starlight. "I am First Speaker Elinder. We thank you for allowing us to dock." His voice carried the same musical quality they'd heard in the transmission, but now Sarah could see how his skin pulsed softly with light as he spoke. "Welcome aboard," Commander Chen replied. "Our medical teams are standing by if you need assistance." Elinder's expression shifted in a way Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "Your offer is kind, but I fear your medicine may not help us. Our affliction is unique." He gestured to a young Tyranny who stepped forward carrying what appeared to be a sphere of pure light. "Perhaps a demonstration would help you understand." The sphere expanded, filling the air with dancing motes of energy that coalesced into a 3-dimensional image. It showed the Tyranny in their prime. Beings of almost pure energy, their bodies channels for forces that could reshape matter itself. The display shifted, showing their gradual decline over generations, their connection to these energies growing weaker with each passing cycle. "We were once caretakers of stellar nurseries," Elinder explained, his voice heavy with memory. "We could touch the hearts of dying stars and guide new ones to birth. Now," the sphere flickered, nearly failing before the young Tyranny could stabilize it. "Now we can barely maintain our own technology. The galaxy has no use for caretakers who can no longer care for anything." Sarah watched as the young Tyranny's hands trembled from the effort of maintaining the simple display. When she looked at Commander Chen, she saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. These weren't conquerors or refugees seeking to exploit Earth's resources. They were a people on the brink of extinction, reaching out their hands in one final hope for survival. The question was, what had caused their decline, and was Earth prepared for the consequences of helping them? Dr. Emma Chen's laboratory in the International Space Station's new xenobiology wing hummed with activity. She adjusted her microscope's settings for the 100th time, trying to understand what she was seeing in the Tyranny cellular structure. The sample, freely given by one of their children, defied conventional analysis. "This makes no sense," she muttered, making another adjustment. "The degradation pattern is too uniform, too precise." Behind her, first speaker Ilinder watched with quiet intensity. His skin rippled with subtle patterns of light, a trait Emma had learned indicated deep thought among his people. "You see something troubling?" he asked, his melodic voice carrying a note of concern. Emma sat back from her microscope and pulled up the holographic display of her findings. "These patterns of cellular deterioration, they're not natural. In evolution, we see random mutations, gradual changes. This is different." She highlighted several segments of the display. "This looks engineered." The light patterns across Ilinder's skin froze for a moment, then began moving in sharp, agitated bursts. "Engineered? You mean someone did this to your people?" Emma confirmed, her voice gentle but firm. "Probably centuries ago, targeting the specific cellular structures that allow you to manipulate energy fields. It's brilliant and horrible. A virus designed to work over generations, making it look like natural evolution." The revelation sparked an immediate response from the Tyranny delegation. Their skin colors shifted rapidly, creating cascading patterns that filled the laboratory with dancing lights. Emma had learned this was their equivalent of intense emotional discussion. Commander Martinez entered the lab, pausing at the unusual display. "I take it you found something." Emma nodded, then watched as Ilinder composed himself, his light patterns settling into more regular rhythms. A young Tyranny child, no more than the equivalent of 8 Earth years, pressed close to him, her barely glowing skin a stark reminder of what they stood to lose. "We need to report this to the Council," Martine said, but Ilinder raised a hand. "The Galactic Council already knows," he said quietly. "They must. The timing of our exile, the way they dismissed our pleas for help." His voice carried centuries of accumulated pain. "They called us evolutionary dead ends, claimed we were no longer fit to maintain our territories." Emma felt her hands clench into fists. "They watched your people suffer, knowing it was artificial." The concept struck at the heart of everything she believed about scientific ethics. The young Tyranny child stepped forward, raising her hands. Small motes of light gathered between them, forming a delicate crystal flower that sparkled briefly before fading. "Father says we once could build cities like this," she said, her voice carrying the same musical quality as the adults, though fainter. "Now I can barely make a flower." Emma looked at the genetic analysis again, an idea forming. "Commander, look at this." She highlighted a sequence. "The virus is sophisticated, but it's old, really old, and we've made massive strides in genetic therapy in the last decade. If we combine that with what we know about human energy potential." Martinez's eyes widened. "The endurance studies, but that's theoretical." "So was meeting aliens," Emma countered, already pulling up new data. "Humans can't manipulate energy like the Tyranny, but we have our own connection to it. Our cells process energy differently, more efficiently in some ways, less in others. If we could understand both systems." Ilinder moved closer to the display, his skin beginning to pulse with a new pattern, one Emma had never seen before. "You believe you can help us?" "I believe we can try," Emma replied, meeting his gaze. "And sometimes that's enough to start changing everything." The young Tyranny child's skin brightened just slightly, a small flower of light blooming above her hands once more. This time, it held steady for just a moment longer than before. The engineering bay of the International Space Station had never seen anything quite like this. Michael Torres, lead systems engineer, stood before a failing crystal core from the Tyranny ship, his tools spread out around him like a surgeon's instruments. Beside him, young Lyra, the Tyranny child who had created the light flower, watched with increasing fascination. "You're going to fix it without energy manipulation?" she asked, her skin shimmering with curiosity patterns. "But how?" Michael grinned, selecting a specialized resonance tool he developed specifically for this purpose. "Sometimes the old ways work best. Watch this." He activated the tool, sending carefully calibrated vibrations through the crystal structure. Hairline fractures began to seal themselves as the crystal's natural formation patterns reasserted themselves. Lyra's skin pulsed with excitement. That's incredible. We always used direct energy streams to repair the cores. I never thought of using the crystal's own structure to heal itself. Across the bay, Dr. Emma Chen worked with first speaker Ilinder, comparing notes on their latest genetic trials. The first attempts to combine human and Tyranny cellular properties had failed, but each failure brought new understanding. Your people's approach to problems continues to surprise us, Ilinder observed, watching Michael work. We grew so dependent on our abilities that we forgot there might be other solutions. Perhaps that was our greatest weakness. Emma looked up from her data tablet. Not a weakness, just a different path. Look at this. She pulled up a holographic display showing the latest test results. Human cells don't just process energy differently. They adapt to new energy patterns. It's how we survived everything Earth threw at us during our evolution. The station's alert system chimed softly, indicating the arrival of the daily supply shuttle. But this time, something was different. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez's voice came over the intercom. Dr. Chen, you're going to want to see this. Minutes later, they gathered in the observation module. Below them, Earth glowed like a blue jewel, but it was the incoming shuttle that caught everyone's attention. Its hull sparkled with familiar crystalline formations, the first successful integration of Tyranny technology with human engineering. We did it, Michael announced proudly. Their crystal technology responds to mechanical resonance just as well as energy manipulation. We can grow it, shape it, even power it using conventional methods. It's not as elegant as their original approach, but it works, Lyra finished, her skin glowing brighter than they'd ever seen. She raised her hands, and this time, instead of trying to force energy into patterns like her ancestors, she gently guided the ambient energy around them. A small crystal began to form between her palms, growing in response to the natural resonance she created. Ilinder's patterns shifted to something Emma had learned to recognize as joy. You're learning to work with the energy rather than command it, just as humans do. The shuttle docked with its characteristic soft thump, but the crystal formations on its hull continued to pulse gently, responding to the station's energy field. It was neither purely human technology nor Tyranny, but something new, something that drew on the strengths of both. We're getting similar results in the medical trials, Emma added, showing Ilinder the latest data. By studying how your people once channeled energy and how humans naturally process it, we're finding a middle path. It's not about recovering your old abilities exactly as they were. It's about finding a new way forward. Ilinder completed the thought, watching his daughter continue to experiment with her discovery. Together, Michael gathered his tools, already planning modifications for the next crystal integration project. You know what this means, right? Once we perfect this hybrid technology, the galaxy will have to recognize that there's more than one way to touch the stars, Sarah said, smiling as another crystal formation bloomed under Lyra's careful guidance. And that sometimes, the best path forward isn't the one you originally planned. The message from the Galactic Council arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, its transmission cutting through Earth's normal communications like a blade through silk. The holographic display materialized in the United Earth Council chamber, showing three imposing figures: a towering crystalline being, a creature of flowing plasma, and a humanoid with iridescent scales. First Speaker Ilinder's skin pulsed with patterns of distress as he translated their formal declaration. They demand that Earth surrender all Tyranny refugees within 30 solar cycles or face complete economic isolation from galactic trade routes. Dr. Emma Chen watched the Earth Councilors' reactions. Some showed fear, others anger, but Council President Santiago simply leaned forward, her expression calm. And if we refuse? The crystalline being spoke, its voice resonating through the chamber. Your species is young, barely space-capable. You cannot comprehend the consequences of defying the Council's wisdom. The Tyranny are a dying race, their decline natural and inevitable. Michael Torres stepped forward, holding up one of the newly developed crystal cores. Its surface sparkled with the distinctive pattern of human Tyranny hybrid technology. Natural. We've proven otherwise. The decline was engineered, and we're already developing solutions. The plasma being's form rippled with what might have been amusement or scorn. You would risk your species' future for these remnants. Their territories have already been redistributed. Their place in the galaxy is decided. Perhaps, President Santiago replied, standing slowly. It's time for that decision to be reconsidered. She gestured to young Lyra, who had been quietly practicing in the corner. The child raised her hands, and crystal formations began growing from the chamber floor, guided by a combination of her recovering abilities and human resonance technology. Impossible, the scaled humanoid whispered. Their power was neutralized generations ago. Emma stepped closer to Lyra, supporting her demonstration. Not neutralized. Change. Just as humanity's connection to energy evolved differently from the start. We're learning from each other, growing stronger together. The council members conferred in rapid, untranslated speech. When they turned back, their tone had hardened. This changes nothing. You have 30 cycles to comply. After that, Earth will be cut off from all galactic trade, all technological exchange, all support for your developing colonies. President Santiago looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of her fellow counselors, the human scientists, and their Tyranny guests. Then she smiled, a small, determined expression that reminded Emma of her grandmother's stories about resistance fighters. You speak of isolation as if we haven't spent our entire history isolated on our little blue world, Santiago said. You threaten to cut us off from trade as if we haven't already learned to be self-sufficient. You warn us about our colonies as if humanity hasn't dreamed of reaching the stars on our own since we first looked up at the night sky. She walked to where Lyra stood, still maintaining her crystal formation. But most importantly, you assume we would abandon people who came to us for help, simply because you told us to. If that's what you believe, then you truly don't understand humanity at all. The chamber erupted in supporting calls from Earth's counselors. The Tyranny's skin patterns shifted through complex emotions, surprise, gratitude, hope, and something else that Emma had never seen before. The Galactic Council's images flickered. You make a grave mistake, the crystalline being warned. Your protection cannot change what they are. No, Michael replied, holding up another successful hybrid crystal. But it might remind everyone what they can become. What we can all become, working together. As the transmission cut off, Elinder turned to President Santiago. They will not stop with simple sanctions. You understand this. Santiago nodded, but her smile didn't waver. Of course, but neither will we stop innovating, adapting, and growing stronger. It's what humans do best, especially when someone tells us we can't. Dr. Emma Chen stared at the holographic display, her eyes wide with disbelief. The simulation had run 50 times, and each result showed the same pattern. Behind her, Michael Torres whistled softly as he reviewed the data. The crystal resonance patterns, he said, they're identical to the human cellular energy signatures. How did we miss this? First speaker Elinder moved closer to the display, his skin rippling with intense light patterns. Because we never thought to look for it. We always believed our energy manipulation was unique to our species. The laboratory aboard the International Space Station had become their primary research center, now expanded with hybrid crystal technology that enhanced their scanning capabilities. Young Lyra sat cross-legged in the corner, practicing with a small crystal formation while listening intently. It's not just similar, Emma explained, expanding the holographic model. Human DNA has the same basic capacity for energy manipulation, but it evolved differently. Instead of external projection, it developed internally, enhancing our endurance, healing, and adaptability. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez entered the lab, carrying fresh data tablets. The first volunteer group is ready, she announced. Over 5,000 humans have signed up for the initial trials. Ilinder's skin pulsed with shock. You would risk yourselves, even knowing the dangers of genetic modification. Michael grinned, setting down his tools. You should see the waiting list. Once word got out that we needed volunteers to help save your people, we had to create a lottery system. Emma pulled up the treatment protocol she'd developed. The holographic display showed the integration of human genetic markers with Tyranny cellular structures, supported by the resonance technology they'd developed together. The theory is solid, she explained. Human DNA can act as a template to help stabilize the degrading Tyranny energy manipulation genes. Combined with our resonance technology, it could not just stop the decline but potentially reverse it. Lyra's crystal creation suddenly stabilized, glowing with a steady light that caught everyone's attention. The young Tyranny looked up, her skin shimmering with excitement. I can feel it better now, she said. The energy flows differently when I don't try to force it. Sarah smiled. That's the human approach rubbing off on you. We had to learn to work with nature instead of trying to control it. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The holographic display shifted to show President Santiago's face. Dr. Chen, the Security Council has approved the trials. You have full authorization to proceed. Emma looked at her team, then at Ilinder. There's no guarantee this will work. The risks to the volunteers are nothing compared to the risk of doing nothing. Michael finished. He stepped forward, rolling up his sleeve. I already put my name in. Might as well start with someone who understands the technology. Ilinder's skin displayed patterns of deep emotion. Throughout our history, we prided ourselves on our abilities, our advanced technology. We thought ourselves protectors of younger species. Yet here you are, risking yourselves to save us. That's the thing about being human, Sarah said, helping Emma prepare the first treatment chamber. We're pretty good at surprising people, especially ourselves. The chamber hummed to life, its crystal components pulsing with the combined energy signatures of both species. As Michael stepped inside, Lyra approached him, holding up her successfully stabilized crystal creation. For luck, she said, her skin glowing brighter than they'd seen since her arrival. Emma initiated the sequence, watching as the chamber filled with a soft, blue-white light. The monitors showed the careful dance of human and Tyranny genetic code, guided by resonance patterns that bridged the gap between their species. Now, she said softly, we find out if two paths really can become one. The massive ships appeared without warning, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Their hulls gleamed with predatory intent, crystalline weapons arrays humming with barely contained power. Earth's early warning systems lit up like a Christmas tree. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at her station in the newly upgraded Orbital Defense Command, watching as the tactical display filled with hostile signatures. Counting 15 capital ships, sir. Energy readings suggest Galactic Council military vessels. Commander Chen's expression hardened as he studied the holographic display. The hybrid crystal technology they'd integrated into Earth's defense systems was already providing unprecedented detail about the incoming fleet. Their 30-cycle deadline wasn't up for another week. They must have detected the success of the treatments, Michael Torres said from his engineering station. His skin now carried a faint iridescent sheen, a side effect of being the first successful human recipient of the genetic therapy. They're not here to enforce sanctions. They're here to stop us. The main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. The crystalline being from the council appeared, its faceted surface pulsating with barely contained rage. Your interference in natural selection ends now. Surrender the Tyranny and all research data, or we will take them by force. First Speaker Ilinder stepped forward, his skin patterns radiating determination. In the months since the first successful treatments, his people's natural glow had begun to strengthen. We are not your property to take. Young Lyra stood beside him, her own patterns bright and steady. She raised her hands, and the station's crystal-enhanced systems responded instantly, creating a detailed tactical display of their own forces. Earth's retrofitted defense fleet might have looked primitive compared to the Council vessels, but they carried something the Council hadn't counted on. All ships reporting ready, Sarah announced. Hybrid systems operating at full capacity. The crystalline being's voice carried tones of disgust. You think your crude adaptations can stand against our power? We have dominated space travel since before your species learned to make fire. Michael smiled, the iridescent sheen of his skin catching the light. Maybe that's your problem. You've forgotten how to adapt. He turned to his console, where the engineering readouts showed dozens of successfully treated humans working in perfect sync with Tyranny systems. You've forgotten how to change. The first Council ship fired, a burst of pure energy lancing toward Earth's orbital defenses. But instead of impacting, the energy met a field of crystalline resonance, splitting and dispersing in a dazzling display of light. Return fire, Commander Chen ordered. Pattern Delta. Earth's ships moved with impossible grace, their hybrid crews combining human intuition with Tyranny energy sensing. Weapons fired in patterns that danced between conventional physics and energy manipulation, creating attack sequences the Council ships had never encountered. Impossible, the crystalline being breathed, watching as their first wave of attacks failed completely. Your species cannot possibly understand how to. We don't need to understand everything, Sarah interrupted, her hands flying over her tactical display. We just need to understand enough to try something new. Something you never thought of because you were too convinced of your own superiority. The battle unfolded like a deadly dance, with Earth's smaller fleet using strategies that defied conventional space combat wisdom. Crystal resonance fields bent energy weapons back on their sources. Human Tyranny hybrid crews predicted and countered attacks using both scientific understanding and intuitive energy manipulation. Final warning, Commander Chen announced to the Council fleet. Withdraw your forces, or we will demonstrate exactly how creative humans can be when defending their friends. Lyra's tactical display showed the Council ships regrouping, their formation suggesting uncertainty. The crystalline being's image flickered as it processed this unexpected resistance. You've started something you don't understand, it warned. The galaxy has an order. Then perhaps, Elindor replied, his patterns bright with pride as he watched humans and Tyranny working together. It's time for that order to evolve. News traveled fast across the galaxy, especially news of the impossible. The quantum communication networks buzzed with reports of how Earth's hybrid fleet had fought the Council's forces to a standstill. But more importantly, they carried whispers of hope. Dr. Emma Chen stood in the newly established diplomatic reception center, watching as representatives from a dozen different species arrived through the quantum gateway. Each delegation carried the same look of desperate optimism in their vastly different eyes. They're calling us the bright world, Michael Torres said, his iridescent skin shimmering as he helped calibrate the translation crystals, not just for accepting the Tyranny, but for proving change is possible. A delegation of beings seemingly made of living shadow approached, their form-shifting bodies contained within environmental fields. Their leader spoke through the crystal translator, their voice carrying harmonics of deep emotion. Our people have been deemed too unstable for advanced technology access. We watch what you achieved with the Tyranny. Perhaps. We'll need to study your specific situation, Emma replied gently. But we're willing to try. That's what Earth does. Across the chamber, young Lyra worked with a group of small crystalline children from a species that had been branded as defective by the Council. Her hybrid abilities let her demonstrate new ways of manipulating energy that worked with their natural formations rather than against them. First speaker Elindor moved among the delegates, his skin patterns showing clear joy as he watched more and more species discover hope. The Council claimed that evolution only moved in one direction. That species either advanced along their predetermined path or faced extinction. They forgot about adaptation. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez said, monitoring the security feeds. The Council fleet remained at the edge of the system, watching but not interfering as more ships arrived carrying desperate peoples. They forgot that life finds a way. A soft chime announced another arrival. This time, a single being of pure energy stepped through the gateway. Unlike the council members, this one's form rippled with gentle patterns reminiscent of Tyranny skin language. "I am Observer," it announced through the crystal translator. "For 10,000 cycles, I have watched species rise and fall, judged by standards set when the galaxy was young. What you have done here." The being's form shifted through colors of wonder. "You have proven that evolution has infinite paths." Emma approached the Observer, carrying data crystals containing their research. "We're not special. We just refuse to accept limitations, our own or those placed on others." "That is precisely what makes you special," Observer replied. "Your willingness to reach across boundaries, to risk yourselves for others, to believe in possibility rather than probability." Its form expanded slightly. The Council's power was built on convincing species that there was only one path to advancement. "You have shown there are as many paths as there are stars." Michael grinned, the iridescent sheen of his skin catching the light. "Speaking of paths, wait until you see what we discovered last week. Turns out when you combine human neural patterns with crystalline energy matrices, a new alarm sounded, not one of warning, but of discovery. The quantum sensors had detected something extraordinary in the laboratory where human and Tyranny scientists worked together. The delegates rushed to observe as a new form of energy manipulation took shape, one that combined the strengths of multiple species into something entirely unprecedented. "This is why they feared us working together," Elindor said softly, watching the experiment unfold. "Not because we might fail, but because we might succeed," Sarah finished. "Because we might show everyone else that the boundaries between species aren't walls. They're bridges," Lyra added, her young voice carrying the wisdom of two civilizations. "We just have to be brave enough to cross them." The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked different now. Where once it had housed only the most advanced species, today it contained representatives from across the spectrum of galactic life. The crystalline walls reflected the varied forms of dozens of species, some glowing, some shadowed, some barely visible to normal sight. Dr. Emma Chen stood with the Earth delegation, Michael Torres, and Lieutenant Sarah Martinez at her side. Their hybrid features drew curious looks from the assembled representatives, but no longer ones of scorn or fear. First Speaker Elindor and young Lyra represented the Tyranny, their skin patterns dancing with complex emotions as the Council's prime speaker addressed the gathering. "For 10,000 cycles, the massive crystalline being intoned, we believed we understood the path of evolution. We created hierarchies, established boundaries, and judged worth based on our own limited understanding of advancement." The being's faceted surface rippled. "We were wrong." Observer materialized in the center of the chamber, its energy form now incorporating patterns learned from both humans and Tyranny. "The experiments conducted on Earth have proven that evolution is not a single path, but an infinite web of possibilities. When species work together, sharing their strengths and supporting each other's growth, entirely new forms of advancement become possible." Michael stepped forward, his iridescent skin glowing as he activated a holographic display. The chamber filled with images of the changes wrought in just one Earth year. Tyranny children playing with recovered abilities, shadow beings learning to stabilize their forms through hybrid technology, crystalline species discovering new ways to grow and adapt. "We didn't do anything special," he said, his voice carrying through the translation field. "We just refused to accept that any species was beyond help. We looked for solutions instead of problems." Sarah brought up tactical displays showing the new defensive networks being established, cooperative systems that drew on the strengths of multiple species. "Earth isn't interested in dominating anyone. We want to learn, to grow, to help others do the same." The prime speaker's crystalline form shifted, and what they had learned was acknowledgement. "The Council recognizes that our previous policies were flawed. The quarantine of Earth is lifted. The Tyranny territories will be restored. with additional compensation for the wrongs done to their people. That's not enough. Lyra spoke up suddenly, her young voice clear and strong. She stepped forward, creating a crystal display of her own, one showing the countless species still struggling under council restrictions. Every species deserves the chance to find their own path. Emma smiled as murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. The young Tyranny had grown so much, just as humanity had grown through this challenge. We propose a new framework, she announced, one based on cooperation rather than competition. Earth offers its research and facilities as a neutral ground for species to explore new possibilities together. Observers form, pulsed with approval. The old order changes. The age of isolation ends. Let this be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned to dance to a new rhythm, one of harmony rather than hierarchy. As the chamber erupted in discussions and proposals, Elinder turned to the Earth delegation, his skin patterns showing deep gratitude. When we first arrived at Earth, we thought we were seeking shelter for a dying race. Instead, we found a future we never imagined possible. Michael grinned, the hybrid features he shared with many humans, now a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. That's the thing about the future. It's never quite what you expect. It's usually better if you're brave enough to make it so. Sarah watched as species that had once been bitter rivals began forming research partnerships, sharing ideas, finding new ways to overcome their limitations together. Look at them all, she said softly. Every one of them told they had reached their limits, that they couldn't evolve further. They just needed someone to show them that limitations, Emma replied, watching Lyra create a beautiful crystal formation that incorporated techniques from 3 different species, are just challenges waiting to be overcome.